Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again for another Film Fanatic show. So it is Monday at about 9:30. Another nice day with this weather pattern we've had the last few days, pretty much all week. Has been super sweet. So it's supposed to get pretty hot again too. I looked at the forecast for this week, and it's supposed to get really hot. So the summer is kind of coming back, which is nice. In the 80s. So yesterday was Labor Day, so it was a long weekend. So I had yesterday off, so it was really nice and relaxed and caught up on some sleep and just chilled out. And the best part of the day was I went to my favorite shop. I went to Blue Moose, and I went to the one. I change it up a lot, but I've been going the last three times or so. Last 3 or 4 times, I've gone to the one in Bangor. And I don't know, that one is really good. It's gotten a little bit better. I like to change things up. Usually I always go to the one in Waterville. They're all it's funny because they're all about an hour away, all the locations. The one in Brunswick is really great, but that's a little bit further. That's almost down to Portland. So I don't go there that often just because it's like an hour and almost an hour and a half away. A little bit too far, but if I'm down in that area, I'll go to that place because it's really awesome. And there has been times where I have just driven down there, but it's for the most part worth the trip. But it's a little bit far from here. So, but each other location in Waterville and then in Bangor, they're all like a little bit less than an hour away. So it's still a far drive for to buy music and movies, but it's totally worth it. It's a beautiful drive, either location. I really like the drive up to Bangor. It's I take all these back roads, so I'm not ever on Route One, and it's really beautiful. You go through all these farming communities and all this stuff, and it's super sweet. So yesterday was a pretty amazing day. I found a movie that I love to death. It's one of my all time favorite movies, and that is Paul Bartel's Private Parts. This movie is like one of the ultimate experiences for sleazy, demented um, horror exploitation movie. You know, it's an exemplar of what the genre for me represents. Is this movie? This movie came out in '72, and I have a long history with this movie. Long history. A good buddy of mine, who I've talked about in past shows, Charlie Hendrick, who was a friend of mine who I way back when, many years ago, I used to play in a couple different like bands with him, a couple different projects. We had a band that I was really proud of. I still am, and we really, I don't know. I felt like we weren't around for too. We didn't have a whole. Our lifespan wasn't very long. Mainly because Charlie had grew up. He grew up here in Maine, but he was sick and tired of living here and wanted to leave, and so he eventually moved. But we had this band Tit City, which was pretty much a fully realized electronic band, and it was super fun. But I felt like there was a time, we were together for a couple of years or so, but there was a probably about 6 months to a year that we hit it pretty hard. We played a lot of gigs, and it seemed with the short amount of time that we had together as a band, we kind of left an impact with people, and we kind of left. I don't know, for what it is, I think we left like a little bit of a mark with people because every now and then it comes up where people will talk about that band, and I still have like a lot of the recordings from gigs that we did. We had started that band had at the end of kind of the lifespan of that project, we were set out to record an album, and we did start recording an album, and we finished most of the recording, but it never got finished. It never got mixed or mastered. And Charlie had all of the music afterwards, after it was all recorded. but it just kind of went into the ether and nothing came out of it. It's still probably somewhere, and Charlie probably has the music, but it was a really great band, and it was a really hard learning curve for me because it was my first time just diving into playing a fully, realized electronic group that incorporated live instruments. And it was awesome. I mean, we played some gigs that were just super fun, and it was a wild time. And we actually played at pretty good amount of shows here in Maine. We played at some bigger shows, which were really fun. We played at house parties. We actually played down in New York City too, which was awesome. We played a couple of gigs in New York at the time that were really fun, and so we had a really good ride for a while, and some crazy adventures. But that band was a real pivotal band in helping me kind of develop, and also having another fully realized project, and that was with my band Quantum. I couldn't have really done Quantum without having that experience, I don't think, because it gave me a little bit more, well, it gave me some experience that I needed, but it gave me a little bit more courage to kind of pursue it and to make that a thing. And the other band that was a real pivotal thing for me was Full Contact Kitty, which was a band I had before that, which was this indie, kind of this edgy, weird indie rock punk band that had electronic elements in it also. And actually, Charlie was a member of that band. But outside of the music thing, Charlie was a super music film collector. He has such an incredibly deep knowledge of film and all kinds of styles, all kinds of genres, all kinds of directors, and when we used to hang out, aside from playing music, and then even after we would practice, we would watch movies together all the time. So he was a real, he turned me on to so many great films, and Private Parts was one of those films. And Charlie has very eccentric tastes. He typically likes or loves a lot of older films, but he knows so much about so many different genres, and he has a pretty high threshold for films that are kind of on the edge of cinema, like films that are really out there, things that are really strange or really kind of pushing boundaries. He was into a lot of those films, and I remember him saying to me before I saw Private Parts. It was one day where I was over his house, and this is going back quite a few years ago now. He had told me about this movie because he knew I had this. We had similar tastes, and we were into lots of different things, and he knew that I liked stuff that was a little bit more on the fringe side too, or that I loved things on the fringe side. And so I remember he had a VHS copy of Private Parts, and he told me, yeah, this is like one of the strangest and one of the most bizarre movies I've ever seen. And I always thought, wow, okay, if Charlie says it's one of the most bizarre movies, then it must be truly bizarre. And then around that time, he had moved away, and he gave me boxes full of VHS. So I acquired a whole bunch of VHS tapes from him, and I still have them. My VHS player still works, but the system itself isn't so great. But one of the movies that he gave me a bunch of really great movies, but one of the movies he gave me was Private Parts. And I remember watching it, shortly after he had given it to me, and I was just, I just couldn't believe, to a degree, I couldn't believe what I was watching. I was just blown away by it. And since then, the movie's kind of become an obsession of mine. And I've always mentioned it, but the grindhouse or exploitation, horror, giallo world, all the sleazy movies that are part of that genre or genres. That's my favorite style of filmmaking. I love the exploitation grindhouse world more than any other style. It's kind of my go-to thing. I always come back to it, and I go through these long binge periods of where I'll just watch those kinds of movies. I'm just blown away by. I just love the grittiness. I love the low budget nature. I love that the films really, explored, or they explore incredibly taboo subjects. I love the sexual aspects. I love the violence in a lot of those films. I love, one of the biggest things is I love the atmosphere that these movies create. I love the practical effects, you know, where everything is done in camera. And the amount of, what I find too is that the amount of, to a degree, humor that's used in a lot of these films. And that one thing I wish big Hollywood would stop doing, but I love that a lot of these filmmakers in this genre just don't take themselves all that seriously, and they can laugh at themselves a little bit. And also the the other thing that I'm always blown away by is the level of diversity. You have crime exploitation movies. You have all of the amazing giallo films that came out in Italy. You have all the horror exploitation movies. You have all of the sex exploitation movies. I mean, there's so many. When you say the word grindhouse exploitation, that's a huge label, but within that or under that umbrella, there are so many different kinds of films. And my favorite with that's my favorite style that's part of that bigger genre is the slasher world. That's my favorite, and I just can't get enough of them. I'm enamored by those films. They're just so fun too. And again, the biggest thing is the atmosphere that they create, and the and I love that it's I've described it this way many times, but to me, it's just because of how I love how raw everything is, and it just feels like you're putting on, a really dirty punk rock album, and it's just like really raw, and there's not a lot of takes. It's really rough, and there's mistakes. It's not super clear, but yet it's just like still goes for the jugular. It's still going for your throat, and it's just they're just so fun, and the music is just so fun, in a lot of ways, I love big Hollywood movies, but more and more I feel like with big budget Hollywood movies, they kind of take themselves too seriously, and that there's so much formula to so many movies that has been done time and time and time again, and these films don't really stick to. They're really in every way, shape or form. They don't stay to any kind of conventional um, formula or method, and that's the other thing I love about them. And I picking your top movies is always a hard thing, but I've mentioned it before. But Tourist Trap is probably my favorite horror, exploitation movie of all time with Chuck Connors. I've seen that movie so many freaking times that it's yeah, it's unbelievable. Just so ridiculous, so terrible, yet so demented and so messed up and just wild, crazy, and just insane, but yet hilarious and goofy. It's got all these things. And, after watching and really falling in love with this movie, Private Parts, I have to say that this is probably tied with Tourist Trap for my number one exploitation horror movie of all time. I just love this movie to death. And it truly is and it's such a weird little movie. It's such a strange little movie. It's hard to describe to a degree, but when I went to Bull Moose yesterday, I found it. I found Private Parts on Blu-ray, and it's a really great transfer. The VHS copy that I have of the film is not very good. It's okay. It's all right, but of course, it's just straight up standard VHS. It's okay. There's no special features. And for the last, without exaggerating, for the last, ever since I discovered Private Parts quite a few years ago, and it's become one of my favorite films, if not my favorite film in the whole sleazy exploitation world. I have been trying really hard, looking for it in places, mostly Bull Moose, but just anywhere I've gone that has movies that are really obscure, and I've looked for it online, and I have never been able to find Private Parts on Blu-ray, even DVD. I was even looking for a DVD copy, and I couldn't find it. I eventually did find a copy. I think it was on eBay or Amazon for Private Parts on DVD, but it was a standard DVD. It was just basically ripped probably from VHS onto DVD, and it was probably not a very good quality. It didn't have any special features. It wasn't like a collector's edition. It wasn't put out by any company that I knew about. So, and I had been looking for it for a while, and this movie is really obscure, like super duper obscure. I never hear it talked about. I never hear it mentioned. Even by the people on YouTube, folks who I love that take the deep dive into the world of horror exploitation and grindhouse cinema. I never hear them talk about this movie, which I'm always surprised. So yesterday when I was at Bull Moose, I was going through the aisles, and I found a couple of things that I was excited about. The one movie I did find that I was super pumped about, which I actually found first, was a Sergio Martino movie called Torso. And I did a Sergio Martino movie yesterday, and I posted a video on that, and he is just amazing. I love his stuff. Just an amazing Italian. He's still going, but just an incredible Italian director. Um, he's just awesome. And I I saw Torso years and years ago, probably when I was a little kid, and I've been thinking about it, and I found it at Bull Moose yesterday, so I was super excited. I'm super stoked to watch it. He's such an awesome director. And then about 5 minutes after that, I was looking through the aisles like I usually do, and I saw, oh, Private Parts. And it's funny, when I first saw this, it was like this way in the aisle. I thought it was at first the Howard Stern movie, and I believe that that's also called Private Parts. Which is funny because a lot of times in my searches, when I've looked this up, when I've Googled the name Private Parts, and I think it's the same title, the Howard Stern movie would come up, and it's really funny. And I've even brought this up to people if they've ever seen this movie, and they'll say, "Oh, the Howard Stern movie," and I'm like, "No, like that's a fun movie, but no, not the Howard Stern movie." I do know one, or I do. I met a guy last year who was a neighbor of where my friends were living, and he was into a lot of these movies, and he knew this movie really well, and I was just like, whoa, that's pretty heavy. But other than that, I didn't know anybody who's seen this movie. I never hear it talked about. So when I picked it out of the aisle, out of the slot, and I looked at, oh, this is freaking Private Parts, and I couldn't believe it. And then when I saw that it was a special edition, and it had quite a few special features, and it was all remastered in 2K or 4K. I was just like, holy shit. And I couldn't believe it. I think I even said it out loud. And I think it was pretty busy in the shop, and I think I even said it out loud. I was like, holy shit. And I don't know what people were thinking, but I was just like, holy fuck, yes. I was so excited. And so I watched this last night, and again, it is truly why I think Blu-ray is the Superior. It's Blu-ray is superior to every other format, hands down. I understand the nostalgia. And I think it's more tied to like the nostalgic reasons to it, because that's how I myself and a lot of people from my generation, how they discovered a lot of these films was VHS, and those kinds of things. So there's an air of nostalgic kinds of things. And DVD versions are really good for certain films. Sometimes they're okay, but usually the quality's pretty good. But generally, when you buy something on Blu-ray, it's a whole new experience. It's really how the movie is intended. The other thing that's so awesome about Blu-ray is like for a lot of these super low budget, kind of sleazy, demented movies, the clarity and the picture, the remastering of the picture and the sight and the sound of everything of the experience is incredible. But it still has that grittiness. It has that. It's still dirty quality to it. It's not. It's really cleaned up and it's really, well, it's not really a word, but beautified. But it's it still has that the essence of how when you first saw that movie and how dirty it was, and just like like you kind of needed a shower after you watched it because it was just like just dirty and filthy. And that's the thing I love about Blu-ray is it's a great balance. It's never so clear and polished that you lose that grittiness. Um, it hands down it is the best way. And I know there's a lot of folks that still collect VHS, and I know of a few people that I've been in contact with, like on through social media or Facebook, who are really into these movies, but they're kind of like, well, I only buy them on VHS and I trade them and I sell them and blah blah blah, and I'm like, I get that, but you know in my opinion, if you really love these films, you're selling yourself short. You're not really seeing good quality. It's they're kind of shit. And so Blu-ray is the ultimate way to go. And again, I'd only seen this movie on VHS with the copy that I have, and I was just blown away by how clear and the all the music's remastered. I couldn't believe how clear this movie was, and just amazing at how amazing the transfer is of this film on Blu-ray. I mean, really, really blown away. Just yeah. And I have to say that this is my favorite release of this year. My favorite new purchase, hands down, of this year. It's fine. Finally getting this on Blu-ray after quite a few years trying to track it down, and then get not and getting like a good edition where there's special features. It's mastered in 4K, like getting that high quality version. To finally get that is just amazing, and it felt like Christmas yesterday. So, and again, this movie was directed by Paul Bartell, who is such an amazing director. He was also a pretty big actor. He starred in a lot of films. Um, the cast for this film is really just awesome. Uh, Anne Ruman and Lucille Benson, who is just so incredibly disturbing in this movie. She plays Aunt Martha. John Vanantonio, who plays her son, again, just completely insane. Paul Bartel, he worked a lot with the famous producer and also director Roger Corman. He kind of started out in his camp where he made all of these exploitation movies with Roger Corman. Uh, just incredible. And I've always been a huge fan of Paul Bartel. I started to, after getting into Private Parts, I was just enamored with his work. His Some of his films are just incredible. Eating Raoul, which came out in '82, which I haven't seen, is supposed to be just like an awesome movie. And I and then he also another movie of his that I just think is just a masterpiece, Death Race, Death Race 2000. David Carradine. It was the first role of Sylvester Stallone. Just such an amazing movie. Cannonball in '76, another killer movie, and then Private Parts, of course, '72. Lust in the Dust in 1984. Scenes from the Class Struggle in Beverly Hills, which is another film. His films also are, I think, not only are they, really sleazy, but they're definitely part of the exploitation, low budget kind of thing. But all of his films are kind of like comedies too, and it's such a great balance of, lots of darkness and violence, but they're also really funny and goofy, and they have this heavy. They're also satires of, when they to a degree they all have his films have like it's a running kind of social commentary in a lot of his films. Just fantastic. And Paul Bartel was also in. He starred in a lot of movies. Also, he was in lots of low budget films. Rock and Roll High School. He was like I think he was like the principal or definitely one of the teachers. I think he was the principal of the high school, but he was just awesome, just an awesome personality. He did a lot of TV movies also, um, and he died pretty young. He died, way too young. But an amazing force in the world of like independent exploitation filmmaking. And again, like I said, this movie is so like it's easily one of the most disturbing movies I think ever made. I think Private Parts. And the interesting thing is it's not like it is graphic and it is like pretty gory and but it actually doesn't show all that much. It's not really, there's not like scene after scene of where there's just like blood and carnage. There's not like copious amounts of sex. It is gory and it is like a slasher movie. And but the film more I think is like kind of a deep dive into like the mind of where like the one of the main characters, the son of Aunt Marcia, is this like psychosexual person who is just completely insane, and it does deal with like really insane psychosexual themes, and it's a black comedy, it's a satire, it's super funny, and yet it's so incredibly disturbing and it's so weird, and yet the movie is very subtle too at the same time. Like it's not over the top. It's there's a lot of great characters, and the hotel where this movie takes place in is just the cast of characters are just so incredibly strange and weird, but it's just awesome. Like, and it's very surreal, and it's easily one of the strangest movies I've ever seen. It's got one particular sequence involving, without going into it, involving a rubber doll that I think is hands down one of the most disturbing things ever. And visually, when you watch this film, it's just like, wow, I've never seen anything like this. And even to this day, I've never seen anything like it before or since. And to think that this movie came out in '72 is just like, wow. Like no one's making movies like this anymore. Um, but if you haven't seen Private Parts, you have to see it. It is a ride. I mean, and it's so fun, it's so demented, it is so twisted, and so damn entertaining. Amazing movie, and it's hard to believe that this came out in '72. It's astounding. So this is Jason Dean. Highly recommend if you get a chance to see this movie. And the other thing too, before I forget, I saw the that this movie just came out, so my timing was right. Shout Factory, which is Shout Factory is pretty good. They put out a lot of horror movies and things like that. I have a few movies of theirs, but not a whole lot. They seem to maybe put out movies that have a little bit more of a commercial kind of appeal. But I was really blown away that they put out Private Parts because this is like super obscure. So, I picture like company like Blue Underground or even Severin or Mondo Macabre to put this out. So I was really blown away. But Shout Factory just released this, and so big ups to Shout Factory for finally putting this out on Blu-ray. And the special features are great. There's some really awesome interviews on here that are they're each like about 20 minutes long or so, but they're really good. So man, super excited. I'm gonna watch it again. I can't wait. So this is Jason Dean. So thanks again, and we will see you next time. Peace.